All right, hey algebra guys. So since I wasn't able to be at school today, I am just going to record a video to show you exactly what I would have done with you in school. So here's the context. This is the one that's called Did You Hear About? It says 9.5 on it in that extra packet I gave you. And we just did a whole bunch of work with systems of equations. And so now we need to make our way to systems of inequalities. So first we've got to make sure we know how to just solve basic inequalities. Then we're going to talk about graphing inequalities. And then we can put more than one together to make a system of inequalities. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to get at. So I am going to do, I think, 3 of these with you right now. Make sure you remember the rules for inequalities and solving them, and then have you try a couple of them on your own. All right, so I am going to do all my work on line paper because this is just not enough space for me to write. If you can write really small and nice and neatly, then go for it, but I don't think that there's going to be a lot of room for you. So if you want to pause it and get a piece of paper, go for it. All right, I am going to do number 1. We are going to start with that one, so let me copy it down. Greater than 4x plus 15. Okay, so this one, when we're solving inequalities, it's just like an equation where that's kind of our middle point. We want to keep this balanced. So the problem here is that we've got x's on both sides. We've got variables on both sides, and we need them all to be in one place. So what we do is we get rid of some of them. I'm going to get rid of these 4 x's. How do I get rid of 4 x's that are sitting there? I take them away. 4x minus 4x would be 0. There wouldn't be any x's there. Subtraction property of equality says I subtract 4x over on this side too. Could I have subtracted 7x from both sides? Sure, it's just that this would have given me then a negative over here, and I'd like to avoid that if possible, just to make it easier on numbers for me. These cancel out, and we have a 15. All right, we know we go reverse order of operations here. We need to get rid of the 3 times and the plus 2, but reverse order of operations, we get rid of the 2 first. So subtraction property of equality, minus 2. 3x is greater than 13. To get rid of 3 times, we divide both sides by 3, and we get x is greater than 13 thirds, which, let's simplify that. 3 goes in how many times? 4 times with 1/3 left over. All right, let's see. Is there an answer? X is greater than 4/3 over here. There it is. The. All right, so number 1, technically the, if you want to fill it in. We probably will not solve this whole riddle unless you want to take it home and do it on your own for more practice. We're just going to do a few of them today to make sure you guys know what the rules are for this. Okay, this was a pretty basic one. There was nothing special about that was different from when you're solving equations. But let's look at number 5. This one is going to be a little bit different, and I want to see if you guys remember the rules that you learned for when you multiply or divide by a negative number. I'm going to copy down number 5. 75 less than negative 5 for x plus 1. Okay, I'm going to bring that over. All right, for this one, here's kind of my balancing point. Before I do things to solve for this, I need to simplify each side. So that means I've got to do a distributive property over here to simplify it. 75 stays, negative 20x plus negative 5. All right, now I want to get this x by itself. There's no x's on both sides, so this is a little bit faster. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. We get 80 is less than negative 20x. But here is the big change. Do you remember what you have to do when we divide both sides of an inequality by a negative? I have to divide by negative 20 to make that negative 20 go away. And this rule is that I can't do that with an inequality and still keep it true. If I divide both sides by a negative, what happens is that this symbol flips around for it to remain true. So over here would be gone. I'd have an x. Over here we'd get down to a negative 4, but this symbol had to flip. So when you are multiplying or dividing by a negative, you have to flip that symbol. Mill Creek, we say flip the sign from camp. Right? We've got to flip that when you're multiplying or dividing both sides of an inequality by a negative. So you did that in the 8th grade focus area. Right? That's something to keep in mind every time, because that is the most commonly missed thing with inequalities, is forgetting that that has to be true. So if you don't remember why that was the case, I can show you an activity if you remind me later that proves it to you really quickly, which is kind of cool. But right now I'm expecting that you remember that rule. So let's try one more. Let's try number 8. Okay, it's right up here, so I'm going to write it down. 2t plus 5 greater than 4t minus 7t plus 3. I try and put a little like curve on my t's so they don't look like pluses when I'm using it with algebra. All right, here's my kind of balancing. I need to simplify both sides. I see the subtraction. I'm going to think about this as plus a negative 7, so I don't forget to distribute that negative all the way through. And I'm going to work on distributive property for both of these. So let's see. 2t plus 10 is greater than 4t plus, here's my distributive, right there. I'm going to combine the like terms on this side here. That would bring me down to negative 3t plus negative 21 over there. Still the same thing over here. And now variables on both sides. And here's where, depending on which decision you make, you might end up with a situation where you have to flip the symbol at the end, or you might not. I could either subtract 2t from both sides, or I could add 3t to both sides. I'm going to choose the one that gets rid of the negative, so I don't have to worry about forgetting my rule of flipping the sign. Because if I don't have a negative coefficient, I won't run into that problem. Let's see, all I'm left with now is negative 21 over there, because that went away. And I'll subtract 10 from both sides. 5t is greater than, careful with this one right here, negative minus another number. It's like a negative plus a negative. It gets more negative. That's going to be negative 31. So now, when I divide both sides by 5, am I dividing both sides by a negative number? Is this a negative number? No, as long as I'm not dividing by a negative number, I don't have to flip that sign. It stays the same. Even though that negative 31 was there, I'm not dividing by a negative. So it stays negative, and let's see, it goes in 6 times with 1/5 left. Let's see, is there an answer that is 1/5 right there? Yeah, that works. So there's a solution for that one. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys to try another couple of problems and pause this video once you know which ones, and then come back and play it again and check what you have. All right, I'm going to have you guys try 7 and 10. So you guys are going to try 7 and 10 on your own, and then come back and check them with me on the video as soon as you're done. All right, so I'm going to copy them down. I've got this one for 7. All right, if you guys are ready, here we go. I'm going to go through them. I am going to do the distributive property to simplify this guy. I'm thinking of those as adding the opposite, plus a negative. 8 plus negative 12x plus, now negative times a negative is a positive 3. I'm going to combine my constants here. 11 plus negative 12x less than or equal to negative 49. Subtract 11 from both sides. And negative minus something gets more negative, so that's going to go down to negative 60. Now here is the tricky part. Tricky. I am going to divide both sides by negative 12, and dividing by a negative right away should remind you that we have to flip that symbol, flip that sign around whenever we divide both sides by a negative or multiply both sides by a negative. And that leaves us with x is greater than or equal to, negative divided by a negative makes a positive 5. So that one should be one of the options on there for you. And let's take a look at number 10 as we simplify this side over here. This one is tricky because there's this minus and then the whole parentheses. That would be like having a minus 1 out in front. There's just one set of parentheses there. But then when we do the distributive property, we've got to distribute that negative through the whole thing. So this 14 is just hanging out for now. And then I'm going to look at this as plus a negative 1. This is going to be plus a negative times a positive, plus a negative 9t. And then plus a negative times a negative, It's like a negative 2. Negative times a negative is a positive 2. Less than negative t plus 30. I can combine some like terms here. 16 plus negative 9t, negative t plus 30. So now I've got t's on both sides, and I got to make a good decision. I want to make a decision probably that's going to get rid of the negative t's. I don't want negatives if I can help it. But if I end up with negatives, I just know I'm going to have to flip the sign when I multiply or divide on both sides. So I think if I add 9 t's, it should get rid of all my negatives. 16, and then negative 1 plus 9 is just 8 plus 30. Now I subtract 30 from both sides, and I am left with, let's see, that's going to be a negative down there. So I would end up with negative 14 is less than 8t. Divide both sides by 8. When we divide it by 8, do we have to flip the sign? Nope, because I'm just dividing by a positive. Answer is going to be a negative. Let's see, that goes in once with 6/8 left, or once with 3/4 left. And I think on the answer key, all the t's are first. So if we want to just change that order, we'd have to say t is greater than negative 1 and 3/4. And that should be your answer. Lots of space to do these. So if you are good with those, then that's all I'm going to have you do. If you want to do more practice with that, then absolutely go for it. What I am going to have you do is to watch the next video that has me going through graphing these kinds of solutions with you, and then you'll be able to get to the next checkpoint. All right, I'm going to stop this and we'll do another video.